Welcome to the podcast. Learn English through life, exploring emotions, connections, and the English language.
Welcome to this special episode of our podcast. Today we're delving into a topic that is often overlooked or misunderstood: the psychological impact of obesity. Beyond the numbers on the scale or societal prejudices, there are human beings carrying an invisible burden. Today, I have the immense privilege of welcoming Sophia, who has graciously agreed to share her story with us. Thank you for being here, Sophia.
Thank you for having me and for giving a voice to realities that are so often left unspoken.
Sophia, let's start with a simple yet deeply significant question. How do you feel when walking down the street or entering a room full of people?
It's hard to put into words. There's always this feeling that you're being judged before you even speak. The stares are heavy, sometimes filled with pity or silent disapproval. Once, I was walking through a park, and a group of children started laughing and pointing at me. They didn't mean any harm. They were young. But that moment broke me. I pretended not to hear and kept walking, but tears welled up in my eyes. There are also moments in public spaces, like on public transport. Once, on a bus, someone openly said they'd rather stand than sit next to me. I acted like I didn't hear it, but every word stuck with me. It felt like a constant reminder that I don't belong in this world. Social events and gatherings are even harder. I remember a wedding where I was seated on a fragile plastic chair. The entire evening I couldn't relax, fearing it might break under my weight. This kind of fear, this constant anticipation of humiliation, is exhausting. Even in moments where I should be enjoying myself, I can't let go.
Those moments must be incredibly destabilizing. Has this affected your self-confidence and the way you perceive yourself?
Yes, absolutely. For a long time, I saw myself as invisible, as if I didn't deserve to be seen in any way other than through that lens. When all you receive from society is criticism or embarrassed reactions, you start to believe you're worth nothing. For example, going to a clothing store is always an ordeal. I've been ignored by salespeople or immediately directed to the plus-size section before I even said a word. One particularly memorable experience, during a shopping trip with friends, I asked to try on a dress, and the salesperson bluntly replied, "We don't have anything in your size here." She said it in front of everyone. I smiled to hide my shame, but inside, I was crushed. These experiences aren't just hurtful. They shape a self-image that is incredibly hard to dismantle. For years, I only wore loose, dark clothing, as if I wanted to disappear.
Sophia, the professional environment can be particularly demanding and sometimes cruel. Can you share how your obesity has influenced your work experience, both in terms of interactions with colleagues and professional opportunities?
The impact of my obesity in the workplace has been particularly devastating, not just because of explicit remarks, but also due to implicit behaviors. I remember a meeting where my manager, joking in front of the entire team, made a comment about people who eat too many donuts, while pointedly looking at me. The general laughter hit me like a hammer. I smiled to save face, but inside, I was shattered. It wasn't just a bad joke. It was a public reminder of my difference, as if my body was a legitimate target for humor. My ideas and contributions were often dismissed or ignored. I could see the difference in treatment between my colleagues and myself. When they spoke, they received attention and praise, but my input seemed invisible, as though my appearance alone disqualified my competence. This constant need to prove my professional worth, far more than others had to, was exhausting and demoralizing. But it didn't stop there. There's also the subtle, insidious discrimination that hurts even more because it's never explicitly stated. For instance, being excluded from office events under the pretext that they were reserved for external representatives, or hearing that I wasn't the ideal face for a project involving public interactions. Every decision like this, even when unspoken, made me feel that my appearance excluded me from the professional circle. These experiences pushed me to withdraw, to avoid informal conversations, and to make myself smaller. I feared finding myself in yet another situation where my weight would be used against me. Over time, I began to doubt my own abilities and my legitimacy in occupying my position. More than once, I considered resigning, not because I didn't enjoy my work, but because I couldn't bear the constant feeling of being judged not for my skills, but for my appearance. Even today, the scars from these experiences remain. Obesity doesn't just affect the body. It also distorts self-perception, and the professional world can be especially unforgiving. It's not just a matter of skills or productivity. It's a battle to be recognized as a whole person, beyond physical appearance.
What you're sharing is so powerful, Sophia. We often talk about the physical aspects of obesity, but rarely about the inner struggles. Can you tell us more about the psychological impact it has had on you?
The psychological suffering is immense. It's like living with an internal voice that never stops criticizing you. Every glance in the mirror becomes a battle. That voice is constant, relentless, and it whispers words of shame. Why are you like this? Why can't you be like everyone else? Over time, those thoughts become your reality. You start to believe that you're nothing but a burden, to yourself and to others. But it doesn't stop there. This suffering seeps into every aspect of your daily life. Grabbing a coffee with friends becomes an ordeal because you anticipate the judgments about what you order. You analyze every glance, every comment, even innocent ones, wondering if they're directed at you. Every outing feels like a test, a confrontation with the omnipresent fear of not being accepted. The subtle humiliations add to the burden. Being ignored in a clothing store is one thing, but it's the stares from other customers and their barely concealed whispers that pierce the most. On public transport, it's not just the panic of a potential seatmate. It's the thought that they might get up or switch seats, leaving you alone with your shame. These experiences slowly destroy you because they pile up, day after day. There were moments when I felt so unworthy that I couldn't even look myself in the eye in a mirror. It wasn't just discomfort, it was total self-rejection. I felt like everything I did was overshadowed by my weight. Even my achievements felt tainted by the constant presence of my appearance. You end up doubting everything: your worth, your ability to be loved, or even respected. This suffering isn't just psychological. It becomes physical, weighing on every breath, every step, and every glance you cast at yourself.
That constant fear must be exhausting. Have you felt loneliness throughout this journey?
Absolutely. It's a unique kind of loneliness because even when you're surrounded by people, you feel misunderstood. People often say things like, "You should just eat less," or "try exercising a bit," as if it were that simple. Comments like that only made me withdraw further into myself. There were days when I wouldn't even get out of bed. I preferred staying in my cocoon rather than risking another humiliation.
Let's talk about words. Sometimes words can hurt just as much as actions. Is there a particular comment or situation that stands out to you?
Yes. Once at a family gathering, someone said out loud, "Oh, Sophia has gained weight again," in front of everyone. I wanted to disappear. Moments like that feel like stabs in the heart because they don't come from strangers, but from people who are supposed to protect and support you. That remark lingered in the air, followed by an awkward silence. But for me, it felt like all eyes were fixated on my body. I smiled awkwardly to mask my shame, but inside, I was in pieces. Comments like that stay with you because they reflect judgment, a silent disappointment. But veiled remarks can sometimes be even more hurtful. For example, a colleague once said to me, "You have such a pretty face. If only you," and then stopped. I knew exactly what she meant. Her hesitation, her awkward smile, it cut right through me. She probably thought she was being kind, but those words fed that inner voice that keeps telling me I'm never enough, that I'm always too much, or not enough of something. And then there's the silence. That heavy silence when you walk into a room or when you're ignored in a conversation. That silence speaks volumes. It says, "You don't belong." Some days, I felt like I was carrying the weight of 1,000 stares, 1,000 judgments, even without a single word being spoken. This combination of hurtful words and heavy silences creates a deep, almost visceral pain that seeps into every aspect of your life.
This really highlights how powerful language can be and how destructive behaviors can become. If you could say one thing to people who don't understand the psychological impact of obesity, what would it be?
I would tell them that what they see is only a small part of the story. Every person with obesity carries years of struggles, doubts, and internal battles. Before judging, try to understand. And most importantly, be kind. You have no idea how much pain your words, or even your silences, can cause.
Sophia, obesity can also influence very personal aspects of life, including romantic and intimate relationships. Could you share how it has affected your romantic and sexual life?
Obesity can have a profound and often silent impact on romantic and sexual life, making these aspects of life even more complex and painful. It creates an invisible yet ever-present barrier: doubt. Every romantic interaction is overshadowed by the silent question, "Am I truly desirable?" This uncertainty seeps into every glance, every gesture, every attempt at emotional or physical connection. The fear of rejection becomes a constant companion. Sometimes it even prevents you from trying to get close to someone. I recall moments when I turned down dates or ended budding relationships, not because I didn't want to be loved, but because I couldn't believe I could be loved unconditionally. Even in an established relationship, this insecurity persists. The idea of being seen, touched, or desired becomes a source of anxiety rather than a promise of pleasure. Every intimate moment is accompanied by that little voice whispering, "What if they see what I'm trying to hide?" This lack of self-confidence creates barriers that prevent true connection. It's not just about the physical appearance, but a broader feeling of not being enough to deserve love or desire. Society's beauty standards, which equate thinness with desirability, only reinforce this sense of unworthiness. This pain adds to an ever-growing emotional loneliness. You gradually close yourself off, not by choice, but to protect yourself from what you imagine to be inevitable humiliation. These invisible wounds deeply affect self-esteem because they touch on a universal truth: the need to be accepted and loved for who we are. But when obesity comes into play, that need feels out of reach, replaced by a constant battle to accept yourself and to hope that someone else might one day do the same.
Sophia, obesity is often portrayed as a choice, but it's much more complex and often tied to factors beyond one's control. Can you tell us more about this involuntary and constrained aspect of obesity?
Obesity feels like living in a body you no longer control, a body that doesn't respond to your expectations, desires, or needs. It's a constant sense of powerlessness, as if you're trapped in a prison you didn't choose. Every day, you wake up hoping for change, but that hope crumbles under the weight of a system that seems designed to make you fail. Every attempt, every diet, every effort becomes another source of frustration because, despite it all, the results don't come. Or when they do, they're so fleeting that they feel almost pointless. This loss of control over your own body is devastating. It steals your confidence, even your sense of identity. You start questioning if you're still yourself or just a version of yourself that you've grown to hate. You want to move forward, but it's like running in quicksand. Every step sinks you further, leaving you feeling isolated, exhausted, and misunderstood. The worst part is the constant judgment from others. Their stares and assumptions only deepen your despair. But what hurts the most is your own reflection, the look you avoid in the mirror because what you see has become unbearable.
Sophia, childhood is a pivotal time in shaping our emotions and coping mechanisms. You mentioned that certain traumas have contributed to your struggle with obesity. Could you elaborate on how these experiences influenced your relationship with food?
Childhood is when our emotional foundation is built, and when that foundation is marked by trauma, it leaves deep scars that can influence a lifetime. I grew up in an environment filled with constant conflict between my parents. The shouting, the arguments, and the persistent feeling of insecurity made me feel like the world around me was unpredictable and unsafe. On top of that, there was an absence of comfort. My parents, consumed by their own struggles, were emotionally unavailable. That lack of stability pushed me to seek refuge elsewhere, and I found it in food. Eating became my way of creating a protective cocoon, filling the immense void left by a lack of love and security. Sweet or comforting foods felt like invisible arms wrapping around me, letting me forget, even briefly, the pain of that insecurity. But it wasn't just at home. At school, hurtful comments about my weight reinforced this feeling of never being enough or always being too much. Cruel nicknames, mockery, and even social exclusion amplified my need to find solace in something I could control, and that was food. As I grew older, this overeating wasn't a choice, but an unconscious response to those childhood wounds. Each bite was an attempt to fill an emotional void, a way to emotionally survive in a world that often felt hostile. Even today, I struggle to untangle the ties between food and those painful memories. But those traumas, though invisible, explain much of my current struggles and demonstrate that obesity is far more complex than a matter of willpower.
What you're sharing is so courageous. Now, let's turn to hope. What has helped you move forward on this journey?
Self-love, though still a work in progress, has been one of the greatest challenges of my life. For a long time, I believed it wasn't possible for someone like me, that self-love was reserved for others, for those who fit society's standards. Every day, I had to deconstruct years of judgment and shame, and it wasn't easy. These judgments weren't only my own. I heard them in the voices of others, in their hurtful remarks, and sometimes even in their silence. What began to help me was surrounding myself with kind people, those who see beyond appearances, who take the time to understand and listen. In that supportive environment, I was able to start laying the first bricks of my rebuilding process. I found refuge in writing. It was my space, my world, where I could put words to wounds I didn't yet fully understand. Each sentence I wrote felt like a small victory, a light breaking through the fog. Then I discovered a support group. Being surrounded by people who share your pain, your struggles, and your victories changes everything. It was liberating to speak without fear of judgment, to cry without shame, and most importantly, to feel understood. That group taught me to see my strengths, even when I thought I had none. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my suffering was real but could also be shared and eased. But what truly transformed me was the moment I realized that my weight does not define my worth. It was a revelation. I understood that I could be loved, respected, and most importantly, love myself. This journey is far from over, and I don't claim to have solved everything. But every day, I choose to love myself a little more. And in doing so, I've found the strength to take back control of my life, to believe in myself again, and to dare to dream. Today, I see myself not as someone who is broken, but as someone who is healing, step by step.
What a beautiful lesson. You are truly an inspiration, Sophia.
Thank you for giving me this space to share.
Today, Sophia reminded us of something fundamental, the importance of compassion for ourselves and for others. Obesity is not just about numbers or appearances. It's a complex human experience filled with invisible pain and silent battles. Behind every number on the scale lies a story, inner struggles, and moments of resilience. We've heard a story that highlights how crucial it is to look beyond appearances, to extend kindness to others, and to cultivate empathy. And thank you, Sophia, for your courage, honesty, and ability to turn your pain into a source of inspiration. To everyone listening, remember, be kind, because you never know the battles others are fighting in silence. Let this conversation be an invitation to greater compassion and a little more love for ourselves and for others. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the podcast for more meaningful conversations. Your support helps us keep these stories alive and reach more people who need them. Take care and see you soon for another episode.